Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Tyrantcast. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today, I'm pleased to present you with the third episode of a podcast-style, primarily audio, discussion topic-centric video series. And for today's episode, I'm yet again joined by two esteemed guests. Together, we'll be talking competitive Conquest with a focus on Octagon. So, before we discuss our community's most prolific series of online tournaments, let's introduce our guests and start with our War Master. So, Sam, who exactly are you, and how are you involved in the Conquest community?
Well, most of your listeners probably know by now that I am Sam Mann, and a Facebook user, Emil, he saddled me with the War Master moniker the other day. That is funny. I will not turn down the War Master moniker. I've been called worse in my life, but yeah, I run the Octagon League, organized competitive play for Conquest. So that's who I am, and that's what I do. And I'm on here all the time babbling. So.
Well, definitely, and that is what we're here to talk about today. I've definitely taken to the War Master title myself, but speaking of the Warhammer 40k Conquest Octagon WA Online Competitive League, we're also joined by none other than our champion from not just one, but our two most recent seasons. So, Corvus, who exactly are you, and what's your role in our community?
Hi guys, I'm Corvus. I go by Corvus Online. My real name is Kevin. Mostly I just play Conquest. I read everything that gets posted in the Card Game DB forums, and I do contribute to the pack and big box reviews that Steiner has been putting together.
Great.
But yeah, for the most part, I play the game and try to beat people as much as possible.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. A wise man named John Gobet once told me the most important part of this community is being a part of it, and I definitely want to thank you for personally knocking me out of the last season, so thank you very much there. But Corvus, you're the champion. Sam, you're the War Master. I wanted to get you guys together to, of course, interview Kevin because of his recent championship, but also to kind of talk about Octagon gaming as a whole. So Sam, you've been running tournaments for quite some time now. You just recently wrapped up your fourth season. Corvus, you ended up winning half of those, but Sam, what exactly were the origins behind the Octagon WA? Like, how did it get started, and kind of what's the origin story there?
Well, it started back in the late fall, I guess about a year ago, late fall of 2014. There was, I believe, the first Conquest podcast, which is also the first to drop off, was the Adeptus Podcastus that right. Charlie Smith of the Concast fame used to be a part of. And he just, I think his name is Matt, maybe. He goes by Talk to Mish on the forums. And I think he's an administrator or a moderator on Card Game DB. But he kind of ran that podcast, and he ran this Octagon League, and I think there was 16 or maybe 18 people, just people that he kind of coordinated through the Facebook group of his podcast. And there came a time in the early winter of 2015, kind of near the end of it, where people were dropping out and not responding, and to emails and everything. And that it was, I guess, relatively speaking, compared to how I run it now, it was relatively primitive. It was just an email blast to everyone with people's names and their email listed there. So it was up to you to email them and then email you back. And people just kind of were dropping off that maybe weren't doing so well. And
sure,
it kind of got to the point where he was like, all right, I'm done running this because, people are just, kind of dropping off. And I looked at the standings, and there was 6 of us that were I can't remember. I think it was 4-2 or whatever the record was. But there was a kind of a clear line of demarcation. And so I just emailed those other 5 guys and said, hey, do you guys want to do, keep this going and maybe do like a top cut or something where two of us get buys or whatever. And kind of the consensus was, well, let's just let's just let this thing be dead and kind of start up a new, bigger and better one. So I kind of took the reins on that, and that was our first winter season of 2015. And it was kind of a small turnout. I think there was 14 of us. And Steiner Paul, he won that league. And then I got an email or a personal message from a gentleman named Sparty, who's no longer in the community. I think he had a kind of a rough go in his local meta. So I think he kind of got disenchanted with the game from that, if I'm not speaking too far out of line. So he kind of dropped out of the community, but at the time, he messaged me and he wanted to like join forces and make it bigger and better and badder. And he kind of came up with that name, Octagon WOG, and that was a big turnout. We had like 52 people, something like that.
Wow.
And then, he dropped out at the conclusion of that, to which Kevin got, I think, second place in that season. So he's won two and got second once. But so I thought, okay, like he's gone and here I am again, like trying to pick up the pieces. So if I want to keep this going and like make it something that the community can rely on to keep the game alive and grow the game and keep people interested, I need to do something like official. So that's kind of when I started my website and for the summer, and I've ran it that way the last two seasons. So I guess that's kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly come a long ways since those humble beginnings. It almost made me think of someone playing chess in the mail, where it was just very kind of chaotic. You never really knew if it was going to be easy to get in touch with your opponent at all. Certainly everything now is very easily run through your website and everything else, but what exactly is in it for you? Like, what's the appeal of running the tournament in the first place? Certainly it's a lot of work, but what do you get from it?
Well, I mean, for me, it's kind of just like a large extension of a local play group. I mean, I was always on Octagon looking for games anyway. There's not much of a local meta here in Kansas City. My buddy Sizer and I play pretty regularly, and there's a few other guys that do come out for some tournaments and things like that. But he and I both travel for work, so there's no like local weekly night where everyone gets together to play Conquest. So, I mean, the main benefit is it's just, like I say, an extension of a gaming community for me, and I think for a lot of people. I mean, I guess, I don't know, if you talk to my wife, she says I'm probably a control freak or I'm anal, so I suppose I don't mind being in charge. But yeah, what I get out of it is I just love the game, and I want the game to grow, and I want new people to come to the game. So that's kind of what the league does. And I mean, it's a good mix. There's people that signed up this past fall that really didn't have hardly any experience at all. I mean, there was a few guys I was like teaching Octagon or the game to in like the weeks preceding the fall season beginning. And, some of those guys made it to the top cut, and some of those guys, got some good wins in, and some of them got stomped. But, I mean, I took my fair share of beatings, and there's no way to get better than playing against really good players. So, you can just learn the game that way, and I think that's a kind of little extra benefit.
Well, definitely. Certainly, Kevin Corvus, you happen to have taken home the championship for 2 of these seasons. I was entirely unaware that you'd actually also taken second place. But what exactly were your humble beginnings with Conquest? Like, what drew you to the game in the first place, and how did you personally get started?
Well, if you go far back enough, the first time I played a Fantasy Flight game card game was the Game of Thrones collectible card game, back before it became a living card game, way back in 2003 or something.
Sure.
And then I didn't really do much in this area until Netrunner came out. I was huge on that game. I got into it right away, and I've kept up with it up until now. And I got used to playing on Octagon because it's just a great way to jump in and play games, and I played in a couple of Netrunner Octagon leagues. So when Conquest came out and I decided I liked the game and wanted to jump into it as well, I decided, as soon as an Octagon League comes up, I'll jump in and try it out as well. Apparently I missed the first one. I didn't realize that the first season with however many players there were, 14 or 16. But when the Spring League came around, I joined in and decided to see how well I could do.
Well, I guess just out of personal curiosity, with the history of playing Netrunner, with playing Game of Thrones, what is it about Conquest that kind of keeps you at least in part faithful to this game? Like, what's the unique appeal here?
It took me a while to warm up to the game. The first few times I played it, I didn't think there was anything special to it, just out of the core set. But the more I played it, the more I wanted to play it more. That there was something really interesting about the sort of area control, or whatever you want to call it, of having 5 or however many planets on the field, and where you sent your troops and where you sent your warlord really had an interesting tactical element that wasn't present elsewhere or in other games. I still love all the other games I've played, like Netrunner and stuff, but I really just want to keep playing Conquest, and I feel like whatever the ceiling is for how good you can be in terms of being strategic in this game, I haven't even come close to reaching it. So it's always something I want to sort of keep, applying myself to.
Yeah. Go on, Sam.
I was going to say you're far closer to the ceiling than me. That's for sure.
Yeah, but it's still far in the distance, which is what I like.
Yeah. Well, what exactly has the online gaming experience been like? Kevin, you've certainly done remarkably well, but do you treat this like you would an in-person tournament? Do you use it as like a testing ground for, actual tabletop games, or...
I'm much nicer when it comes to face-to-face tournaments. I'll bring silly decks, and I'll try to help the other players and commiserate and stuff. I think because the field is so open when it comes to a big online tournament like this, I really just try to do the best I can do. It's still testing. I think any game, even if you're playing in a tournament, is still practice, because hopefully you whether you win or lose the game, you learn something about the decisions you made in it. So yeah, it's all practice. But I think when I'm playing online, I sort of try to be as cutthroat as I can.
Right. Well, I certainly can't blame you at all there. Something that kind of dissuaded me from initially kind of enrolling and signing up for the most recent season was knowing full well that because this was open to anyone in the world, we would have people that could compete at a national or world championship level, and I definitely did not consider myself as being able to kind of stand on par with players like that. Personal experience I had with the tournament is learning that I was quite a bit better at this game than I gave myself credit, but I suppose, Sam, you not just run the tournament, you're not only the War Master, but you're also there in the trenches with the rest of us grunts. I guess what exactly have been your personal highs and lows of running the tournament, and what's it like, participating in a tournament that you're actively running?
Well, I mean, it's not that much different, like, just because I run it. I mean, the only thing I really have control over is the pairings, but even those, I have like a system of like randomization to kind of ensure that I don't have some bias, like, oh, I want to see, Mitch play Corvus, or, I beat player X, and I need him to do well for my strength schedule, so I'm going to pair him against this crummy player. Like, I could do that, but I kind of have a system in place when I get the results and how I enter them in my spreadsheet to ensure randomization. And I do have to, like, backtrack and make sure there's no, like, duplicate, rematches from earlier in the league. So like other than that, kind of just takes that bias out of it. And then other than that, it's kind of like just two separate things. Like the one part of me is running it, and the other part of me, it's, when it's time to play my weekly game, that other part doesn't really matter. As far as highs and lows, I mean, it's always frustrating when people don't respond to other people's, PMs on CardGameDB. And there's not too much of that. Like, we had, I think, 56 people in the fall sign up, and I think within 2 weeks, all the drops that happened dropped in the first 2 weeks. Maybe it went into the third week, but like in my rules section, I just say, if you're MIA for 2 weeks, I'm dropping you, because I don't want to keep hearing it over and over. And there was like one poor guy who, he was playing people that were active in the league, but just for whatever reason, they weren't responding as promptly as maybe they should have, or they couldn't get their schedule online with this one poor guy who, just he was just like the guy who no one could find a time to schedule against every week they were paired up against him. So that can be kind of the frustrating part is, these messages, hey, I can't get a hold of this guy. But that's really like the only low, and that comes with the territory. And for as much fun as it is to, tune in on some of these games and see them happening and, just getting to run the league and be part of the league, it's a small price to pay. As far as like playing in it, I guess way back in the 2014 Adeptus Podcastus League, I was obviously on the top cut or whatever, and then I did make it to top 4 on the first one we did, but that was when the field was small, and I had to play Davis for my last match, and I thought, well, I'll lose, and that'll be that. And of course I did lose, but the strength of schedule gods were kind to me, and I made it to the top 4. But my prize for doing so was having to play Davis again. So I didn't make it into the top match, but I guess that's as good as I've done. But, I just enjoy playing. I mean, I kind of approach it kind of like Kevin said, from a serious point of view. Sometimes on Octagon, like last night, I played Kevin and I played Straken. I would never probably play Straken in the Octagon League, so I do approach it a little more seriously than I would regular Octagon play. And I want people to get whatever they want out of the league. If people want to use it to test janky decks, that's great. If they want to use it to stick with one deck the whole time because they're preparing for a tournament at their store or nationals or whatever, that's great too. I suppose I'm biased because I run it, but I do look at it like winning this, league. I mean, to me, I would put that on par as winning a giant regional, or maybe even above that, just because of the depth and the breadth of the field. There's so many good players. I mean, you've got guys who've won national titles in it. You've got guys who've been at the top table of worlds, like Seth, who's in it, and a lot of great players. So, I want guys to get out of it what they want, but I do look at it as, a pretty, serious, competitive tournament, so to speak.
Well, I definitely think so. I mean, we've personally heard of regionals that have maybe 3 or 4 players show up. You happen to mention Seth Rosen, who took second place at our 2015 World Championship, and he didn't even make it to the top cut. So there's truly some incredible players in the league. You happen to mention Warlord.
Oh, just to say for Seth's sake, he did make it to the top cut.
Oh, he did.
But I think he got knocked out in, I can tell you right here. He got knocked out in the first round, but he did make the top cut. So.
Right. Well, my mistake there, but clearly there's superb players in the top cut just throughout the entire tournament. Ever so often you have a statistical anomaly like me squeezing in. But, Kevin, earlier you mentioned that you look upon this like a pretty serious tournament. In regard to Warlord choice, you ended up going with Packmaster Kith. I suppose, what exactly were your thoughts behind that Warlord? It's a very prominent choice in our meta, but why exactly did you go with her among all the other options?
First of all, just on the point of taking it seriously, I'd like to back up what Sam said. From talking to other people who play in the league, I mean, I have it on good authority that some people play this game because they want to have fun, and I think that's still as true in the league as anywhere else, right? So I wouldn't want people to be discouraged from joining the league just because they don't think they can win it. I think you guys both have loads of fun, regardless of how well you do in any given league, and sure. I feel the same way, right?
Sure.
Now, Kith. I'm looking at the Road to World stuff that has been compiled by Warfather on the forum, and I think I might be wrong because I don't know what every other LCG is like, but I think the claim that Kith is the best Warlord, and we've had basically the same meta since April, I guess. I think the claim that Kith is the best Warlord is probably the most substantiated claim in any LCG. I mean, we've had such a long tournament season where we've gotten to see how well Kith does against everyone else. We've had so many top players choose to bring Kith to events and do quite well with her. So for me, it was a no-brainer. How I got there was in the spring league. I played Aunchi all the way through because he seemed like fun. And when I got to the finals, I got absolutely crushed by an Eldorath player. And I thought, you know what, this Aunchi Eldorath matchup really, really sucks for Aunchi. And so that got me to thinking, well, if I want to win one of these leagues one day, what kind of Warlord would I take where he or she doesn't really have any bad matchups? And at the time, I'd been testing this and that, and I thought, Kith is probably the most well-rounded of them. So I took her to the regionals that we had here, and she did great, and so I decided to play her throughout the Summer League, and the only game I lost was in the mirror against another Kith, and so that really cemented, in my opinion, the fact that Kith is just really solid throughout. And I had no more problems with Eldrath, so that made me happy. In the Fall League that just wrapped up, I initially wanted to do something completely different, and so I jumped on the Tyrannid bandwagon, and then I lost to Kith, and I thought, screw this, I'm playing a Kith again, and so for the end of the Swiss and the elimination rounds, I jumped back on Kith, because she really, compared to any other Warlord, for me anyways, she really feels like just setting cruise control and really, going through games with way less effort than any other Warlord, where you need to think and try not to make mistakes.
Yeah, well, you kind of touched on earlier, just there's a mountain of evidence to demonstrate that Kith is definitely a powerhouse. There's a whole hell of a lot that she does well, and not too much that she's poor at. I suppose my own experience just in picking a Warlord was, I initially joined the league somewhat out of obligation just because I'm friends with Sam. I didn't want to not enter his tournament. I figured the Space Marines are a fairly easy faction to pilot, or at least that seems to be like the general community consensus. So I figured there was a low probability of me screwing up. I ended up going with Ragnar because people said he was slightly more competitive. I've always been a power gamer at heart, and I just kind of opted to go with that. I've adopted the moniker of the Hive Tyrant, but I didn't really give too much thought to playing Tyrannids just because I'm a very try-hard individual, and my personal experience going through the league was, first of all, having a lot more fun than I figured I would, and then actually kind of demonstrating to myself that I should have some modicum of self-confidence just because I was able to knock some pretty, competent players actually out of the league. But Kevin kind of stuck with Packmaster Kith once it came down to the wire, but Sam, you kind of went with a variety of Warlords. Like, what was your rationale behind that choice?
Yeah, to back up like what Kevin just alluded to, I do play for fun. I want to win. Yes, I want to win. But I'm not like a win at all cost. If I was a win at all cost, I wouldn't have brought Shadow Sun to Worlds. I probably would have done something else. So I have noticed, though, that people that tend to stick with one Warlord for the most part do better. But this could be like a chicken and egg thing. Like, are the players who are better players sticking with one Warlord, or are they doing better because they're sticking with one Warlord?
Right.
It's probably a little more of the former. But yeah, I don't know. I played for fun. So my first matchup, I brought Zerathur, and I lost to a Zogwart player. And then, I kind of had this, second to Chaos, I like Tau. So I thought, I'm going to try Shadow Sun out. That's, I'd kind of been on, getting back onto her, and, well, that sounded bad. But you know what I mean. And so I played her, and I went 3-1 with her in the league. So I guess I should have, should have stuck with her a little more maybe. But yeah, I didn't play the Shadow Sun deck I took to Worlds. I played like this janky Space Marine heavy deck with like Crushing Blow and Indomitable and all kinds of stuff. And it was fun. I kind of looked at it like, I'll switch it up. I'm not committed to one Warlord for the whole thing. I don't know if I'll always stick with that philosophy, but that's what I did for this league. And I had a question like for you, Kevin. If you had not have lost to Kith with the Swarmlord, do you think, like, you played 2 games with Swarmlord, you won them, you lost to Chris Bates, Brain Damage 99, who's a great player. Because I've got the spreadsheet in front of me on my computer, I can see that, you conceded on turn 4, and he Clavexed you as his MVP. So I imagine it was one of those games where it was just like, ugh, I got crushed by Kith kind of feeling, I imagine. And then you won your 4th game with Swarmlord. So, like, if you had been 4-0 with Swarmy, would you have stuck with him, do you think?
I think I kind of had a warped perception of how good Swarmlord was because I got to test him like 7 times or something before the league started, and I'm pretty sure I went 3 wins and then 1 loss with him in the league. So I went 10-0 before being handed my loss.
Right.
But I never played Kith. Played against Kith, and I really think the Kith matchup is quite bad, at least for the way I built my deck. The biggest unit you have that's a heavy hitter is Volatile Pyrovore, which matches up very poorly against Clavex. If you go any bigger, then you're just giving even more, free money to him when he Clavexes.
Sure.
And Kith brings 4 damage to every fight, while you bring 2 because your little tokens get spawned to the other planets. I think it sort of reality came crashing down, and sometimes all it takes is 1 loss to realize that a deck isn't put together to take all comers. And while
Sure.
I think Tyranids have lots of really strong things going for them, they're not well-rounded enough at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Like, just in general, the Tyranids did not do so great in the league. I mean, Swarmlord went 5-10. And 3 of those 5
mine,
wins were you. Right. And then Old One Eye went 2-4. And I believe both those wins were one player. I think it was K Warrender who went, the 2 Old One Eye wins were both him. So, Old One Eye 2-4, Swarmlord 5-10. They did not fare so well in the league. I mean, in fact, when I posted all the league data on my website, I kind of broke the Warlord into 2 groups, like those that had more than a dozen games or more, and then those that were played not that often, just because, like, a 2-1 Urian at 66 win percentage shouldn't be, like, in second place.
Clearly, Urian's awesome. I mean,
that's awesome. And so, of all those Warlords with a dozen or more games, Swarmlord was dead last at 33% win percentage. And, Old One Eye, I guess he was middle of the pack of those Warlords that didn't get played too much. But I think you're right. I think they still have a little bit of ways to go. And that makes sense. They got a small card pool right now, so I guess that's natural. But they didn't quite have the big effect or showing that I thought they might.
Well, I guess, regardless as to what we eventually see with the Tyranid card pool being developed, whether we see cards come out that kind of elevate the position of prominence of some of our non-Packmaster Kith Warlords, just from a purely tournament structure standpoint, Sam, I believe that the Warhammer 40k Octagon WA Online Competitive League is going to be changing ever so slightly in the near future. Do you kind of want to introduce some of those changes?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't want to upset any Orc fans out there or anything like that, but, like I said, when this gentleman, Sparty, contacted me and wanted to join forces for the Spring League, he came up with that name, and I don't know. I think unless you're an Orc, when you say the word WOG, you just sound like a stupid idiot, and I'm not a fan of Orcs. Like, from a lore perspective, they're probably my least favorite faction. Not necessarily from like a gameplay perspective, but just a fluff perspective. And you and the guys over at First Planet have been nice enough to have me on and promote the league. And every time I'm on, I can never just give out the URL. It's always like a giant pain to spell out WOG, and it just always irked me. I thought it was kind of dumb, and I just thought, you know what, I stuck with it because of, like, brand recognition, because the spring tournament was so well attended, but I thought, okay, maybe this thing's kind of going to stand on its own now, and we got a new year, so why not change it? So I have changed the name of the online Octagon League to the Black Crusade. The URL is very easy. It's just blackcrusadeleague.blogspot.com. You can actually still go to the old one, and it'll redirect you, but yeah, just a slight change in name, a little change in theme, I guess, but it'll still be ran the same way going forward in 2016. I mean, I think we've gotten to the point where, I didn't really hear hardly any negative feedback at all these last 2 seasons. I think for the most part, it runs pretty smoothly, and I think I've tried to answer every question that could come up, in my FAQ or my rules link, and so I'll just continue doing that. If guys want to get involved, just go over to the website, blackcrusadeleague.blogspot.com. I post like a madman on the forums and the Facebook page. Registration for the Winter 2016 League will open up the day after Christmas, December 26th. So you'll have 2 weeks to register then. And anybody can play. I welcome any and all people that are interested, even if you're brand new to the league. We've been talking about competitive this and competitive that, but really it is just for fun, and you can learn a lot, and you can have a good time. I mean, even in the games I lost, I had a pretty good time. And, you can message me or get a hold of me. I'm happy to, if like time permitting, show you the ropes and how Octagon works. And, we'll have some good prizes. We made up the alternate art Warlords, and I've got enough of those printed to last me for a while. And then just actually today, Mitch, you and I kind of finalized the artwork. I've got some custom-made alternate art planets that we're going to do. So
right.
I think going forward into 2016, the top 8 players will get a full play set of the alternate art planets. And just like the Warlords, they'll be on, thick 16-point card stock, and just a nice little prize, try to get people involved. And even if you don't make top 8, everybody that shows up and plays enough games, you get a participation prize of a Warlord. So, yeah, come on over if you're interested, and be happy to have you.
Yeah, I mean, I personally had a much better time in the tournament than I was expecting. I was just totally anticipating getting wrecked the entire time, but I won many more games than I was expecting. Without a single exception, everybody I played against was a complete gentleman. I've actually recorded all the different games that I played, so you can watch me kind of struggle my way to eventually, I think I was eliminated trying to make the top 8, but even at the very end there when I had to play against Kevin, he was still a fantastic guy. I certainly witnessed the power behind Packmaster Kith firsthand, but it was a great match. I certainly learned a lot throughout the entire process, and I'll definitely be back next season. Hopefully the turnout is going to be better than ever before. And as we see our Planetfall Cycle packs start to slowly trickle out, Decree of Ruin is headed to stores now. Hopefully there will be at least a few contenders to kind of challenge Packmaster Kith's position of prominence here. But I guess, Kevin, you happen to mention that your own experience with the Tyranids, it was good, but when it came down to it, you still shifted factions in kind of assessing all of the, Tyranid cards that we've started to see spoiled here and there. We've got Subject Omega X 62113, we've seen Acid Maw, the Striking Ravener, the Gene Stealer Prowler that you can ambush into play, like a 2/2 for 1 resource. We've seen the different Planetfall Cycle Warlords. Do you think that any of those are going to make much of an impact? Like, do you see any of those that might rival Kith for our upcoming season?
No. For the short answer, it's very hard to sort of synthesize all the information you get from all these spoilers for an entire new a cycle.
Sure.
Whatever, this Planetfall cycle. Some of the Warlords seem quite strong, but not necessarily every faction they're going into has enough to support them.
Right.
In terms of Tyranids, I would be surprised if Subject Omega was miles better than the other two. So really just the rest of their card pool needs to grow, and I think all 3 Warlords are fine. And I don't think Tyranids are bad. I mean, I know who the best 4 Warlords are in the game, and after that I'm really not clear, because there's a good, there's a pack of 20, and sorting from, 7th and 13th is really tough. I think it'll be a while before Tyranids are at the top, but I don't think anybody would be crazy to play them.
Yeah.
Who are your top 4 Warlords, Kevin?
Kith, Eldorath, Kato, Ragnar.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
I wondered if maybe Zerathor was going to sneak in there over one of the Space Marines, but
I understand that Zerathor has very strong supporters. I've never personally witnessed him being that good, so I can't speak to that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big Zerathor fan. He's probably my favorite Warlord, but here we are at the pretty much the end of 2015, or definitely at the end of the 2015 competitive season, and Chaos is the only faction without a Nationals win. I do think there's one more National left, like somewhere. I guess that was pretty vague, but I know Russia just had theirs, and I heard from Warfather that there's one more coming. So I guess they still have a chance, but there was no Zerathor in the top cut at Worlds. I guess technically there should have been. Eric Taylor should have been there, but even that would have only been one. So, I don't know. Maybe they need a little more support. And Tyranids, I think their biggest problem is they don't have like a real heavy hitter. Like, Shrieking Harpy can be awesome, but even that thing only hits for 2. Like, I played a game last night where I had 2 Shrieking Harpies at the planet, one with regeneration, and I had initiative. And even still, I lost the battle because, I couldn't chew through the 6 hit points of this guy's Soul Grinder fast enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, I don't know. I think I'm kind of with Kevin. I think they have a ways to go.
Well, I guess for any of our upcoming Warlords, Sam, do any of them stand out to you as possible Tier 1 contenders?
Well, just based off what we know, and of course there's so many cards that we don't know anything about that are coming in this cycle.
Right.
I think, there's been a lot of praise about Broderick War. I don't know if he'll be that good or if people are just excited because he's probably far and away above better than Straken and probably even Torquemada. So I'm not quite sold on him yet. I could easily be the more I play him. I do think Starblaze could be pretty good out of the gate. I think the deck building there can be a little bit of a head scratcher just because there's so many options. Like, you can take, I think, 12 two-hammer units, but, do you want to be drawing into command units in mid or late game? Probably not. So I think Starblaze has potential, but just based on what we know, and a lot will change by the time he comes out, Mavros looks to be the best, in my opinion, out of the gate. He just looks bonkers. The fact that his attachment is not a relic, and that he can have Iron Halo and his Crozum Arcanium in play. The fact that he can use his action twice during the deploy phase on a Blood Angel vet at a blue planet just as a stall. I mean, that seems bonkers to me. I think he'll be pretty strong. And my gut tells me very sadly, that Barzul, the Hatebound, is going to be the weakest that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, I basically share your sentiments entirely there. I'm very excited about Mavros. I've seen Broderick War in some of the, sneak peek videos I've released on my channel do some incredibly nasty things. I think Starblaze has some fantastic tricks, but I think they're going to be much more difficult to pull off than people were initially thinking when they saw those spoilers. Hopefully Barzul doesn't, flounder down there with the likes of Colonel Strachan and Urian, but just like you said, there's still so much to be seen in the release of so many upcoming cards. But I suppose just kind of wrapping things up and touching on some closing thoughts. Of course, Kevin, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I want to congratulate you again on winning the past 2 seasons. I suppose, what are your plans for going forward? Are you going to retire and move to Florida, or can we expect to see you compete again?
I hear Florida's nice this time of year. I'm definitely going to sign up for the next league. No reason not to. At least, maybe if I lose the next one, I'll become all embittered and start playing some other game.
Right.
But I'll definitely.
Woe is me! I've only won 2 out of 5 of these things.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there in the winter.
Well, sounds good. And I suppose just while we've got you here, for players that are still just breaking into the competitive scene, like for me, I think at this point I've created something like 140 videos, but I've still only played maybe like 20 or so games. Any pieces of advice for players to, break into a competitive scene or try to up their game to a little bit, more competent level?
Yeah, how much time you got? Because I have lots of thoughts whizzing in and out of my head. Sure, in sort of really quick or quickish bullet points, play more than 20 games, because practice is good. Whenever you play a game, try to figure out what you could have done differently if anything went wrong. So play every game as a kind of practice. If you have people in your meta or people who you play online regularly who are accommodating, try to practice the parts the parts of the game that you feel least comfortable with. I think a lot of people struggle just coming out of the gate with the first command phase, and I did too when I first started playing. So if you have a buddy you can play with, just say we're gonna do the command phase, and then quit on turn 2 every time. Just see who's ahead and then quit, and do that 6 or 7 times in a row, and see if we can sort of pick up some general rules. Following up on that, focus on the command phase more than you are currently focusing on it. I think I can give this as advice to everyone, because everyone that I've played against is not as focused on winning command as I am, and I win a ridiculous amount of the time. So I really think that is key. It's the most important phase of the game, and there's a lot to be gained and lost there. More specifically, if we're just going into the command phase, after you get the basics down of, put your weakest units at the back of the line and your combat units somewhere near the earlier planets and so on, and put your 2 command units across from their 1 command units, there's a couple of things you can do to really sort of squeeze more out of it. Make sure your deck has at least 25-ish command units. Sometimes 30 is fine. Don't focus on winning first planets for the first few turns. If you can, that's great. If you have to give a few up, that's usually fine, especially if they don't have relevant battle abilities. If it's just some 3-icon planet which is going to heal a guy, then that's fine to let go. And I think, again, when I said earlier that people don't value the command phase enough, if you put a unit at the first planet turn 1, you're essentially giving your opponent a free Archon's Terror. That might not be... That's being slightly melodramatic, but it's kind of true. That opponent ends up routed, and when he's back in HQ with your Warlord, the next turn your Warlord has to babysit him. If you put an Assault Valkyrie at the first planet, next turn you can't really go to planet 5, because then you're leaving your Assault Valkyrie out of combat for a long time until the fight for the first planet rolls up to planet 5. So you're routing one of your command units, and you're constraining your Warlord's next deployment, and you're losing out on options for your second turn's deployment. So you really need to weigh all that against what you get from winning the first planet, and too often people are too eager to send stuff to the first planet. There's a lot of other little stuff for the command phase, like try to lose command where you're most eager to send your Warlord, because the best thing you can do with your Warlord is flip command. So if your first deployment is playing a Void Pirate, and then your opponent plays Bieltan Guardians across from the Void Pirate, that's great, especially if you had the presence of mind to put that Void Pirate at a planet where you want the battle ability to trigger,
right?
Because that's where you'll be sending your Warlord. A lot of people don't seem to keep that in mind. Often the correct thing to do when you see someone putting a Void Pirate at whatever a key planet might be on the first turn, maybe it's Planum because he wants to move his big combat unit from planet 1 or something, try to tie command there rather than beat him on command, because then he's getting less out of sending his Warlord there. Instead of flipping command, he's just going from a tie to a win. One last thing, and probably the most important one, like I said, I could talk about this for a while, prioritize card draw on turn 1. Resources are great, and as the game progresses into turn 2 and 3 and 4, you are going to get a better sense of how many cards and how many resources you need. On turn 1, you want a lot of cards, because the worst thing that can happen is that you don't draw any new command units for the next turn, and if you don't have any resources, the 4 you get automatically at the end of the turn are usually enough for you to have a reasonable deploy on turn 2.
Right.
So I will often have games where I draw 6 cards on turn 1 and my opponent draws 1, and then we go to the HQ phase and we each draw 2 more, and then I have a terrific deploy on turn 2 and the game is effectively over. So you really want to fight over those cards on the first turn, and then whenever after that you feel you need cards.
Well, something I'm wondering about is just because we're going to have so many new Warlords coming out, probably within a week or so, we'll have War and Starblaze as options for players to pick up their local game shop. How did you go about, initial experimentation with the Tyranids? How are you going to be playtesting our upcoming Warlords? Like, once we've got new cards available, how are you, as a strong player, going to go about kind of assessing those?
I haven't given it much thought. I think I start by building the deck that seems the most fun to play, with maybe a couple of more outlandish cards. And then if that does well, I'm encouraged and I want to play the faction more, and then I sort of trim it down and say, all right, typically you want to, get rid of some of the more fanciful cards and put in lots of, just good, common, salt-of-the-earth command units and things. I probably won't be testing Starblaze because I have no idea what he's supposed to do. But War just seems good and straightforward, so I'm just going to throw together basically the Strachan deck I had before, but with War instead, and see how that goes.
Sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. I feel bad for Strachan because he's already, at the bottom of the heap, I guess. I guess maybe he's, sitting on top of Urian, but that's about it. And I just feel like he's just going to be totally replaced by War. And although that's probably good for people who want to do well with Astra Militarum, I feel like overall it's a little bad for the game just because, there's no way to... It's like, what are you going to do to make him better without making War and maybe Torquemada so much better too?
Yeah. I think John Gobet pointed out today something that I had completely missed is that Strachan and his command squad happen to have the Catachan trait. Maybe we could see something with that, but apart from that little thing, just like you're saying, Sam, it's hard to pull Strachan, it's hard to pull Urian out of their hole without, just completely making Kith insane or something similar for Broderick War.
Yeah, I saw that John posted that too, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I hadn't really thought of it either, but I don't know. I think Strachan would be a tougher fix. I've said this before, but I think Urian can be fixed with like one card. I think he needs a support that says after you play a torture event, exhaust this support to give all your units whatever, whether that's an extra command hammer, whether that's an extra hit point, whether that's an extra attack. I think he could be fixed pretty easily with a card like that. Not that he'd jump up to, tier 1 or even tier 2, but you get him out of the cellar.
Sure. Well, I suppose with all of that said, Sam, any final thoughts, anything you'd like to get off your chest, any final tournament promotion you'd like to toss out there before we close this episode out?
Sure, yeah. Just like I mentioned earlier, go over to blackcrusadeleague.blogspot.com. You can... on the right side, there's a bunch of links, about us and FAQs and league rules, and read that. Feel free to PM me if you're interested. I want to see the game grow. I want to see the game do well. I think Game of Thrones 2.0's got all the Flava Flav going on right now, and everybody's all hot on that. And rightly so. It's a very popular IP, but that kind of combined with this lag of new releases. I'm like sad or fearful that people will kind of give up on Conquest, and I don't want that to happen. So feel free to come over and join us and have some fun playing in the league.
Sure. I will definitely say that anecdotally I've seen a huge uptick in view count for all the preview Warlord videos relative to the stuff that's been out for a year or so. But Kevin, thank you so much for coming on tonight, humoring Sam and I and our shenanigans. I suppose before we close things down, any final words of wisdom or just nuggets of strategic gold that you'd like to throw out there to the community?
Well, yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be on. I just like to echo what Sam said. I'd really like to encourage people to play in the league. I think the bigger the league is, the better it is. Regardless of your skill level, there's something to be learned by playing in a sort of structured way. And the bigger the league, the more we can sort of move the game forward, because solving these strategic puzzles really can be interesting, and it's very worthwhile. And if we can have something that's accessible to everyone internationally, that's, I think, the best venue to sort of make the game a better game for players.
Definitely. I think more community involvement is always a fantastic thing. If there's anything that I try to accomplish, it's just trying to grow the community, but I suppose I'll just end by saying thank the both of you for coming on, and to all the viewers out there, feel free to share your own competitive experiences. We've certainly had a wealth of players starting their own unofficial tournaments. We've got Dan Young's upcoming Noob Beatdown Possessed tournament. There's the unofficial, I think, is it the Scottish Nationals that's coming up? And there's the Battle for Terra. There's, the Black Crusade that you're throwing on, Sam. So there's certainly plenty of competitive options out there, whether it's a store championship or whatever it happens to be. I definitely would encourage players to play. Don't be like the Hive Tyrant. Don't be afraid to compete. Get out there, get some practice in. But I'll just thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll just say, as always, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you've not done so already. If you've ingested this content on iTunes, I'd very much appreciate a review. Rate 5 stars if you do like this stuff. More viewer and listener engagement means that I'm more prominent in search rankings, and if more people stumble upon Conquest, more people might try the game out, like what they experience, and just like Kevin was saying, we all send the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to pour dollars into this product. We grow our community, and the company does as well. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I'd encourage you to do so through Twitter or on Facebook, and of course I'd be honored were you to contribute to my Patreon. But I'll just end things by saying thank you once again for watching or listening, and be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.